I'm kind of a believer that in any pursuit, at least in the domains that I'm interested in personal development and, developing others, working with organizations, there's no real top to the mountain. There's always going to be room for improvement. So I like how I like how your podcast is titled The Edge of Excellence, because I think it is. We talk about learning to work and look for your own growth edge. So it's more about a state or a zone of learning and developing yourself versus some point you reach to, some milestone that you get. Now, there's milestones along the way, but for me, excellence is kind of this zone of being in kind of a high performing mode of operation. And I think everybody's felt it in one way or the other, whether you're training for a marathon or you've got a really good workout regimen, or you're in a sweet spot in your job. It's something where you're playing to your strengths and you're really learning and growing and pushing yourself.
Thank you very much for making time for the show. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. We've got lots of great shows coming your way, and today is no exception. Today we have Adam Sachs on the call. Adam has had a crazy path, and he's going to talk about serendipity and looking for the opportunities that are passing you every day, because Adam is going to teach you how to find your calling. And basically it comes down to try again. Adam says there's no real top of the mountain. You're in a constant state of learning and developing. And guess what? He knows, because Adam is a coach and a consultant. He works on rebuilding Navy submarines and aircraft carriers. He's owned several businesses, and he found his way in a most interesting way. Welcome to the Edge of Excellence. Adam, thank you so much for making time to talk to me today, and welcome to the Edge of Excellence. How is the weather up in Seattle, and how is it affecting your coaching business?
Hey, thanks for having me, Matt. Pleasure to be here. The weather in Seattle, you probably would have guessed it, is rainy and overcast today. And I actually did not have to go where I work into the shipyard today, so no effect on business for me.
And do you typically go in for work, or do you stay at home and work? I know COVID is starting to...
Yeah, COVID has changed it all for all of us, hasn't it? Yeah, I do kind of a hybrid approach. I work remotely a couple days a week talking with people, and I'm primarily on site at the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard, a base for the U.S. Navy, where they repair aircraft carriers and submarines. I work with a team that supports the project leadership that runs those repair projects.
And because it's something so sensitive and you've got these multi-year projects, you want to be there because it's a 1 or 2 year project. You want to be there to see what's going on a couple of days a week, to see how you're coaching and how your advice is being carried out.
Yeah, it's a kind of a unique consulting type engagement, in the fact that we're there on the ground working on it, embedded within the teams that we support and serve. And you're right in the nature that with clearances and the way they safeguard information, they're very careful about any sort of digital communications, email, telecom outside the wall. So it's just a lot easier to be inside the gate there at the site.
Wow, interesting. So preventing hacking by forcing you to drive in. I like working in person anyway.
Yeah, me too. It's a lot easier. You read people's body language. It's so much easier. Even with the masks on, we've still noticed a huge difference in quality when you're sitting there in the room with someone versus trying to do it over, telecon or Zoom or something.
And so we'll get into exactly what you do and exactly how you got into coaching and your career path. But prior to that, I want to back up a little bit. You're dealing with some of the greatest Americans that you can deal with on that Navy base. So you're probably used to excellence and seeing a lot of excellence, but why don't you share with us what your definition of excellence is?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I'm kind of a believer that in any pursuit, at least in the domains that I'm interested in personal development and, developing others, working with organizations, there's no real top to the mountain. There's always going to be room for improvement. So I like how I like how your podcast is titled The Edge of Excellence, because I think it is. We talk about learning to work and look for your own growth edge. So it's more about a state or a zone of learning and developing yourself versus some point you reach to, some milestone that you get. Now there's milestones along the way, but for me, excellence is kind of this zone of being in kind of a high performing mode of operation. And I think everybody's felt it in one way or the other, whether you're training for a marathon or you've got a really good workout regimen, or you're in a sweet spot in your job. It's something where you're playing to your strengths and you're really learning and growing and pushing yourself.
So in your definition, then, someone could be on the edge of excellence. They never get there because there's no real top of the mountain. So they're constantly on that edge of excellence, but the actual person, the being, is constantly excellent, even though they may not have perfected anything. They're in a process of being excellent that then affects how they play an instrument if they've never played one before, how they buy groceries, how they do their job.
Yeah, I think so. Otherwise, I'm a believer. Like my wife and I have a 5-year-old son at home. We talked about before about having kids, Matt, and what that journey with fatherhood is like. I want to be able to relate to my 5-year-old as excellent when he does something really well. For him, a big thing we're practicing right now is manners and showing gratitude and saying please and thank you and being respectful of others, when he's on the playground and things. And I think when he's really practicing that and embodying, respect for others, that's kind of its own form of excellence for kids in high school, So I don't think that it has to be about, landing your dream job or making $1 million. I think it's playing at that growth edge. And if you do that, the good things will come, from that state of performance or state of being.
That's interesting. And I think I told you that I never heard the same definition twice. So you have someone that's 5 years old that can be excellent or on that edge of excellence and hasn't applied their behavior, their patterns, their intelligence to any one thing and become a master of it. Hasn't even lived 10,000 hours, but hasn't worked 10,000 hours, but they can have the mindset, the habits, the routines of excellence, and then that will create excellence in whatever they do.
Yeah, it's probably not the adjective, the first one I would choose for a 5-year-old. We tell him he's doing a great job, But I like to think that I've met young people, like high school students, college students, that maybe they don't have the same resume that you or I would, or people in their 40s or 50s, but they're performing in a way that definitely sets them apart from their peers. And there's a way that they're kind of bringing it, if you will, that will lead to results. So that's I don't know, not to put too fine a point on it, but I think it is more of a zone of operation than some top of the mountain, if you will.
Well, I like your definition. I like focusing on the process. I like putting everything you can into everything you do. And we all know people like that. There's the people that wake up in the morning and have a routine that's productive and bite off the biggest challenge of the day and crush it and go work out at the end of the day and call their mom and dad and check in with their buddies. And they have a process, just a life process, a life routine that leads to excellence. And then there's probably some people that have been pretty good at something, maybe even excellent at something, but they don't have the process. They got lucky. And by your definition, maybe they're not excellent in general.
Yeah, excellence in that second example there could just be a passing milestone. You might get lucky every once in a while, but I think you're right. I think when I talk to people, especially about improving in their career or their role or the way they lead teams, you want to reach for the levers that you can control, and the process, as you're pointing to, is something that I think we have a lot more control over, because you can set up your schedule, you can plan for things, you can get the gym membership, you can push yourself to be consistent. And that's what's going to lead to results, I think, for most of the successful people I've come across. I don't know about you.
So consistent in excellence will one day lead to achievements of excellence. Focus on the process, focus on what you're doing every day. And it can start even before 5 years old if your kids are getting these. And I see it, man. I've been a chairman of a school board. I've been a 4th grade teacher for a little bit because that's what I want to do when I retire. I've worked with college kids, and you see that you have the patterns or you don't.
Yeah. Yeah, so much of it is, especially with the kids, so much of it's home life. We see a huge difference in some of the kids that our son comes across or play dates, and you don't want to, pick on any family. I think a lot of families are out there doing the best they can. And yet it's remarkable when you have a way that a family behaves and treats each other and the things they reinforce. We talk a lot about incentives in my line of work, the way you could set up a family and the structure to have certain incentives for kids in terms of behaviors. It totally shows up. I think we're a product of our nurture in that regard.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to back in the day for you. What was life like in high school? How did you see yourself, and how did you find this kind of interesting path to where you are today?
Yeah, in high school, I would say I was confused a lot in high school, trying to figure out who I was. I was trying to find, I think like a lot of young people, trying to find an identity to try on or that I could live into. I was a bit of a hybrid. I wasn't a total athlete. I was into music. I worked a lot. My dad had a business. We had a landscaping business growing up and a family farm in mid-Missouri, where I'm from, or outside the St. Louis area. So I was a very busy person. I had a lot of friends, but I didn't have any one solid, group that I hung out with. I kind of floated between groups, and that's something I noticed about myself. I was kind of a sensitive kid. I always had a little bit more of a 10,000-foot view of what was going on with situations than a lot of my friends. So I made pretty good choices, I would say. That was helpful, as I could see that, like, even when things got tough in high school, I was like, okay, I got a lot of life left here. This isn't going to last that long. Probably best to just stick with what I know is important in the long haul. So that's one of my wife always compliments me too. She says that's one of my strengths is slow and steady. She's fast and agile, and she sprints like a jackrabbit on all things project and work related, and I'm more of the slow, consistent turtle-like pace, if you will.
So if you're in high school right now, and I know not many of our listeners are, but if you are, maybe you're in college and you feel overwhelmed, you're not the only one. If you feel confused, you're not the only one. If you are comparing yourself to other people and you're kind of putting yourself down a little bit, welcome to high school mentality. And we hope that you grow up fast so you can look back and realize you were better off in high school than any high school person thinks they are. We all think we suck in high school. And then you look back, well, I wasn't so bad. So you're a sensitive kid. You're moving around to different groups, so you blend well, probably. It's another way to look at it. You have high EQ, probably another way to look at it. You appreciate unique attributes of different people, another way to look at it. And where did you see yourself going? What did you think you'd be doing when you were back in high school?
Yeah, so my plan about my sophomore, junior year of high school was to go into construction. Actually, that was my big dream, was to become like a union electrician. I actually went to a trade school I went to a small Catholic high school outside of St. Louis, and they had a tech school program for juniors and seniors. And so I did that for 2 years. And when I graduated, I hadn't applied for college or anything. I got out and I worked for a non-union residential electrician in the St. Louis metro area for about a year, and really quickly realized while I could do that, it wasn't for me. And I was leaving a lot of stuff on the table with my ambition and skills and intellect. And I just didn't want to work that hard. Like, it was backbreaking. I was working with these guys who were, I don't know, late 40s, 50s at the time, and they were having back problems and arthritis. And we were out there, a snowy day, installing like landscaping lights on the outside of a soffit of a house. And it was like 35 degrees. And they're like, what are you doing? If you can go to college, what's wrong with you? And so I was thinking, like, okay, these guys, again, that kind of humility or having the bigger picture in mind, it's like, okay, these guys probably know more about how this goes than I do. And they know more about this industry. And if they can see me better than I can myself, I should probably listen to them. And so I left that and went to community college the next year. So I was a year behind some friends, but it was kind of a gap year for me. And the fact that I learned a lot about myself, and I really had something great to compare my college experience to as I got into college and classes got hard and things like, years later, I would look back and I'd think, okay, it's this or working construction. It's this or being out there freezing my butt off in a January morning, hooking up outside electrical outlets on the side of a house. I don't want to do that. So it really gave me some motivation to apply myself.
And again, you saw the big picture. Some people would sit there and fret and freak out. You keep seeing the big picture. You're in tune with that around you, which gives you opportunity to pick up the path to excellence, right?
Yeah, that's becoming very apparent to me in this conversation.
So you go to college, and what happened then? How did you figure out what you wanted to do next? What was life like in college? Your buddies were 1 year ahead of you, so you're hanging out with the kids a year younger.
Yeah, luckily I went to the University of Missouri in the middle of the state there, and I was able to room with some guys that I had gone to school with. So it wasn't until they graduated a year early before I really kind of felt that gap year kick in. But it was it was my first time really out of the house, away from the family. So I definitely had a good time. Probably partied a little bit too much. I again wasn't totally clear on what I wanted. I was interested in I've always been interested in a broad, array of topics, and I went kind of mainstream business. I did hone in on ag business management towards the end there. I actually had a hard time getting into what they divide the business school at Mizzou into upper and lower levels. And my GPA wasn't good enough to get into the upper level when I needed to. You have to do it by the end of your sophomore year or something. So I had a buddy over in the ag school, and he's like, "Hey man, come over here. It's smaller. The teachers spend more time with you. They don't have that stupid GPA restriction. Come on over. And plus you're from a farm." So I was like, okay, this is a no-brainer, right? So I went over and did that. And and so it was again, kind of, there was just this sense of kind of floundering around and not really sure what I wanted, but I knew I needed to graduate. It did take me 5 years, but I made it. And there was a couple different teachers I really latched onto, and a couple different classes I really latched onto. And then the internship that we've, how our paths crossed, Matt, your company, College Works Painting, I did go through that. And that was probably the biggest impetus that really got me focused and latched onto this idea of becoming a business owner. That was very important to me, and I really identified with for several years there, like during and after college.
And you never know, right? People are so concerned about what's your major. And I think, wow, how do you even know how to pick your major? Because nobody's taught you about it. Nobody's sat you down, and it doesn't really matter.
It doesn't matter. It's such an impossible. Let's just give these young kids credit. I don't want to give Generation Z or whoever's in college right now, I don't want to totally let them off the hook. It is important to have a plan. It's important to be paying attention and knowing where you want to go. It's an impossible task to be given no experience in something and then order. It's like ordering food from a restaurant you've never been to before. You don't know what it's going to be like. So you have to pick something blindly. And then, at that age, you're right. People, these kids are taught to place. I was taught to place such an important price on what my major was, and it would determine what jobs I was eligible for. And at the end of the day, it didn't really matter because I switched several times after graduation. So
it doesn't matter. Yeah. But if you go back to your definition of excellence, there's no real top to the mountain. There's milestones along the way, but it's a zone of being a high performer. And then in our conversation, it turns out that you're always looking around. You're on a path, but you're always looking around to see if you're on the right path. And you may have to jump off. So my wife, by the way, wanted to go into sales. She's the opposite of a salesperson. She was a great salesperson, had to jump off. Now she has a baking business. My brother-in-law wanted to go into sales, worked for one of our companies, wasn't very good at it, and figured out he needed to jump and go to a different path. Now, both of them are happy. Both of them are super successful. They just had to be open. You go to the electrician job. Thought that was your path.
Thought it was.
You're listening, and so that's the great advice for people on here. Pay attention, be open. Serendipity. You never know what's going to come up. And if you're in a process of always being excellent, you've got these routines of always being excellent, you're just aiming forward as fast as you can to do the best you can. Those opportunities are going to be available because everyone's going to know you're doing a great job. So you're in college. You did the College Works program. You were really successful at the College Works program. Got a little bit of the taste of business. You had a little bit of more contracting.
Yeah, exactly.
And then how do you end up coaching the Navy on building ships?
Yeah, so there's a few more steps
fixing
between
ships, I guess.
Right. There's a few more steps between there and here. So I graduate college. I go get a sales job, just like everybody and their brother, right? And I wasn't very good at it, and I didn't like it. It wasn't even. It actually what I thought it would be similar to my experience in having this internship in my own business, and it wasn't. It was selling for someone else. It was totally different. It was a product catalog I didn't really care about. So I did that for about a year and left. I went back and teamed up with. I got like a part-time job, and I think the young people listening to this, if you're not familiar with side hustles, please become familiar with it. I work in basically a corporate environment, and everybody from the 20-somethings up to the baby boomers have a side hustle. Anyone who's like ambitious, I mean, everybody's got something. Even the older guys, they've got houses and rental properties and things. So here we are in the 20 teens or whatever, or 2008 or 9. And I start up an internet business with a buddy of mine, a friend from college, another CollegeWorks alumni, and we're going to sell online class notes to people via this online marketplace. We work on that for a year. It picks up a little traction. It flops and fails. Learned a lot. Had a couple other small endeavors in there, probably not even worth mentioning now. And I'm sitting here after the kind of conclusion of that business, thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Didn't like the sales job. I'm passionate about having my own business, passionate about learning and development, and have just put all my eggs into this internet business basket, and it flopped. And an ex-girlfriend calls me up and she said, hey, I think I know what you should do. She said, there was this coach, this executive coach that came into our company. She's working in healthcare or something, came into our company, spoke to our team. He reminded me so much of you. You should check this out. Check out professional coaching, whatever. So what do? I go on Google. I Google, professional coaches in the St. Louis metro area, pull up a couple names, cold call a few of them just to try and pick their brain. And one of them was a past U.S. Army drill sergeant and pharmaceutical sales rep by day. And he also did coaching on the side as his side hustle or whatever. So I talked to him. He's at Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri, firing artillery shells. There's bombs going off in the background. And he's asking me questions like, so what do you want to do with your life? And what do you have to do? And I hear these explosions. It's a really weird phenomenon. But I worked with him for a little bit, and no one had ever, with the exclusion of the internship with my district manager, no one had ever put it to me as plainly as he did, and just said, hey, it sounds like you went through some stuff. Sounds like you're a little bit scared. You've got some great skills. And it just seems like the thing to figure out here is how do you apply these skills to something that works for you, that you're passionate about. And if we want to work together on that, here's how this looks, et cetera. And pretty quickly, I was like, oh my God, how do I do what you do? And I had, by that point, got a new day job and borrowed a little money from my parents. And I applied for this coach training program based out of, it's a company based in San Diego. They had a Chicago program, 2011. And I went through that for a year and hung up my shingle as a professional coach, while also, I think I was selling mortgages at the time just to make rent and make the bills pay. So, yeah. I'll pause there and see if that's a good stopping point.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Okay. So I'm going to do this. Let's cut out the pause there and get started again. So that is really interesting. And we're got to go back to that serendipity. You're just like paddling in the water. And I just found some land. I'm going to hang out for a little bit. Paddling in the water. I don't like this land. Paddling in the water. So you go do your startup number one, and you're selling these notes. It flops, and everybody's experienced that. I thought there was a startup number two before the coaching. Nope. No,
there was some stuff, just myself, odd construction jobs. I mean, it wasn't enough to even worth talking about.
Bunch of side hustles put together.
Yeah, several side hustles, a string of them, let's say.
And then this person you meet starts probing, and you start thinking, wow, I love the experience. I want to do that. And so you put your money where your mouth is. Serendipity pops up again. You love the experience. You go do that. So you get the certification, and now you've been a branch manager of a construction company that you ran. You've had a construction job. You've had a variety of kind of side gigs that you put together. You've had a sales job. You have all this experience, and now a whole different ball game. You decide you want to be a coach. You go devote a bunch of time to it. And you went and worked for Edward Jones, which is a financial management company, not as a financial planner, not as an asset manager, not as an adjuster. you went and worked as a coach. So they actually hire people to coach their employees to make them better, which there's big kudos to them for doing that. And how did you jump from Edward Jones to where you're at now?
Yeah, so that was so if I back up a little bit, so I went through the coach training program, hung up my shingle, didn't give up for a year. That's probably a really important thing. Got out of this program and I'm like, okay, how am I going to do this? What's going to be my thing? Tried out a couple different niches, was putting on workshops, working with a few people one-on-one. I was like, oh man, this is a little harder than I thought as well. And then sure enough, right when I needed a little bit of help or some more experience, this opportunity opened up with Edward Jones. Went in there in 2013, helped them build out a training program inside of their training and development umbrella. They stood up this new group of professional coaches to work with their financial advisors in the first 5 years of business. Did that for about 3 years with them. And then my wife we were married and she was getting ready to have our first son. And I needed some time to step away. I was on the phone working with people one-on-one, supporting them in the heat of battle, right? They're new financial advisors standing up a branch in wherever, Kansas or something. And I'm supporting them basically 5 or 6 hours of calls a day for about 3 years. I said, okay, I got to step away. Did my own thing, went back to my own business, worked with some small to mid-size, actually a lot of building trades, construction business owners that had employees that were working with, how do I manage these people? How do I have a training and development program, an onboarding program for these people? So working with them on those kinds of initiatives. And then my wife and I decided, hey, you know what? We want to get out of Missouri. We want to see what else is out there. We want to travel a little bit. Let's see if we can find something on the West Coast. And so I cold applied to this company, CACI, who's a defense contractor, and they had just won a project for training and development efforts for the Navy. And so one of the options were Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, Norfolk, Virginia, or here outside of Seattle in Puget Sound or Bremerton, Washington. And so I came up here in 2017, and I've been here a little over 3.5 years working with leadership on project teams that is responsible for these aircraft carrier and submarine avails, as well as, the whole shipyard, the whole place is about 14,000 people. So we work with the leadership in terms of how can we integrate coaching into their training and development efforts? How can we single out key teams that have some immense responsibilities and huge projects that they need some support with? They're often standing up new teams. How do we get these personalities working together and help them kind of orient themselves towards hitting their milestones on time and under budget?
Wow. So you got people listening right now thinking, whoa, I don't know what I want to do. And basically what you're saying is get going and keep your eyes open. You never know where you're going to end up. So now you're helping the Navy, but you're not in the Navy. You're helping the United States, but you're not an employee of the United States. You kind of like teaching. You don't like sales. You like supporting. You're doing that. And you're working on it. Just as a side note, I think I got it right. They have these giant boats that they put out to sea for like 2 years, and they bring them in every 2 years to spend 2 years rebuilding them. Do I have that right?
Yeah, the milestone, the timelines are different depending on the type of boat. But yeah, that's about all I can say in terms of logistics and timeline. Yeah. But yeah, you get the idea. So the Navy has like 400, vessels, 400 something vessels, and they have to be repaired. And there's a whole federal workforce that's in charge of, you think you're taking your car to the shop is a big deal. Like it's crazy the amount of planning and technical proficiency and engineering that goes into preparing these vessels.
Yeah. What if your car was 5 football fields long and 1 football field high with numerous engines? I really got to give kudos to the Navy. And I know you told me before, the same team works on the same boat, so they know what they're doing. But the Navy is wise enough to know that we can always improve, and we can do it safer, faster, better, cheaper. And they've decided that the way to improve is have someone in there constantly coaching the team, making the team better, finding their strengths. And you did mention to me Strength Finder. How do you use strength? And I use DISC. I have a whole episode on DISC. You're the second person that loves Strength Finder. So how do you use Strength Finder in your coaching? And how would understanding your strengths by going to strengthfinder.com or reading the book help a 20-something find their path?
Oh my gosh, it's huge. Having done a lot of this work like you said, paying attention. You can have, sometimes people reflect back to you things like, oh, after they work with you, they'll say, oh, Matt, hey, I noticed you're really good at that. You're really good at ideation, thinking up new ideas or brainstorming things we could start, or you're really good at collaboration, or you're really responsible. Man, I can always just count on you. So taking the Strength Finder assessment helps. It just gives you your top 5 strengths. There's 34 strengths as they kind of define them, and it'll tell you what your top 5 are, as well as you can buy the whole 34. And what was so funny is a lot of the things, looking back now, in those jobs that I wasn't good at or wasn't satisfied, that role required strengths that were way down towards the bottom of my strength set. The role I'm in now is probably one of the first jobs where my top strengths really line up with the key roles and responsibilities of the job. And we talked about DISC as well. I've taken DISC. You said supportive several times. I'm a strong S. I think I'm an SC, supportive and conscientious. Not the most direct, not the person that you necessarily want going out, knocking on doors, cold calling, like that kind of work. Or there are other, jobs that require some of those other talents. But being able to understand yourself, the earlier, the better. I think for young people, if they can start to engage in these and figure out what are they interested in, and then what strengths can they bring to bear on those topics, it kind of starts to answer itself in terms of what you'd actually be good at.
Yeah, and you can test yourself now. You're in the car driving, listening to this podcast. You're sitting at home. You can test yourself now. I liken it to fishing, right? I like to fish once in a while. You don't just go out on the ocean and drop a lure in the middle of the ocean. You go fish the place where you went fishing before and there's fish, or someone else told you there's fish there, and you kind of know what bait or lure to use. But in jobs, there's no one that gives them a Strength Finder test or a DISC test in school. There's no one that sits down with them and goes over all the jobs that are out there in the world. That's why we have this podcast. But people can go take a Strength Finder test, figure out what they're good at, and then just go find the jobs that match up to that. Now, we can help you. We've got the Edge of Excellence bundle. You can go to Adam Sachs Coaching, and maybe he can help you too. But you can do it on your own. Just go read job descriptions and see what is going to align with your strengths. Because what Adam's saying is, when you're doing something that doesn't align with your strengths or with DISC, your natural behavioral patterns, you're cutting against the grain. You're fighting yourself. So Adam is a SC. He's a supportive. There's jobs for that, like consulting, like coaching, not sales. And the funny thing about College Works, my wife is the same score as you. She was the best manager, the best district manager. You can fake it for a couple years. You can do the things you need to get your resume as wonderful as it can be, but you can't do it for your entire life. You're going to go crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a real satisfaction component that was missing for me, and they talk a lot about, we've got some people on my team who have been certified in delivering strength finders, and they talk about how you can use your other strengths to kind of cobble together what's needed for the role or for a specific task. But it's just so much easier and so much more enjoyable when it lines up with who you are. Yeah, why would you do that?
Every person listening to this podcast, there's about 1,000 wonderful jobs that you can find in probably a month, and 1,000 horrible jobs. How do you know which one? You can't unless you do something like take a Strength Finder, take a DISC test, and do it scientifically. And then once you know, it's way easier to practice serendipity like Adam does and be aware. Like when your girlfriend or wife comes to you and says, hey, or ex-girlfriend, hey, I think this would be really good for you. Bing. Why don't I check that out? Or you have that gut feeling where I just hate this. Bing. Maybe we should check something else out.
The other thing I would mention, Matt, to your point, or to your questions a while ago of, who did I think I was or what my plan was in high school and college, that's changed several times. I mean, when I did the internship we were talking about with College Works, I was very identified with kind of this startup entrepreneur. And, at the time, it was post.com bust, but the successful internet entrepreneur was very sexy for like young college men. Like, it was just everywhere. Mark Zuckerberg, people had him as a poster on their wall. I mean, it was like, that was the dream, right? And to do that, to start that out, it was very much the solopreneur route. And here I was, this person who now I've realized really good on a team, really good at helping see how ideas and plans and strategies will work once they're created, but maybe not creating the idea or the product or the offering myself. I need a team. And I was trying to I kept beating my head against this door of like, I'll do it all. I'll do it myself. I'll be the solopreneur. didn't work for me. And then it took me a while to actually come to that conclusion of like, oh, maybe I'm not this ego ideal that I'd made up about the successful, one-man gunslinger, future internet entrepreneur. I had to realize like I need other people. And some of the greatest things throughout history have been created with teams and with people working together. And I don't know why it took me so long to realize that. But again, I think that's where paying attention and looking at some of these things and getting feedback from other people can help you really see how you fit in and what path might be best.
I don't think it took that long for you, Adam, because the alternative is a midlife crisis when you're in your 40s, right? So you figured it out early. Our listeners are just getting started with life. There are tools out there. You can take a DISC test. You can take a Strength Finder test. There's a little research to be done. Go read job descriptions, talk to people. You can skip the midlife crisis. That's why we're doing this podcast. You can skip it, but it takes a little bit of effort. Most people don't listen like Adam listens. Most people aren't paying attention like Adam's paying attention. Most people don't let 1,000 flowers grow and practice serendipity. And so they get stuck. And back to that swimming analogy. If you're going to swim across a lake, you don't duck your head in the water and go. You got to pop up and look around and be able to absorb the indicators. You're going the wrong way. You're not going fast enough. There's danger, there's safety. And it's the same thing in the job world. And by the way, Adam has things he hates doing every day.
Sure.
Yeah, and I have things I hate doing. We both love our jobs. We both get to be teachers, consultant, and coaches. I love being a teacher, consultant, and coach. But, I don't like accounting, and I got to do that every day. It's just you don't want to be stuck in the thing you don't love all day.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the other thing I would add to all this is, as I think back now about kind of the path that got me here, there's a certain humility that I think I tapped into early of being willing to not only be wrong about my idea of the world or how I thought it had to go, but the humility of listening to people that have gone before me and are gone before us and have done what we want to do. Because a lot of what helped me, as I think back on some of these key markers where I pivoted, I turned, I was really putting a lot of faith in what someone else said about me or opportunities or, hey, I think you'd be really good at this. And I think that young people, like if you're smart, you can give credit where it's due. And I remember being a 20-something and thinking, oh, these 50-year-olds, they don't know anything. They don't know what they're talking about. It's the blind leading the blind out there. But now that I get into the business world, I look to people that are, 10, 15, 20 years my senior, and I'm just thirsting for like, okay, what's he going to say that I can pick up on and I can use? Because the best, it's like they say about the best art is stolen or borrowed or, repackaged. There are so many good ideas out there and understanding of the way the world works, or, there's so many people that just want to help you win too. I had so many people that took time for conversations with me and would ask me questions or listen to me or throw out an idea or an offer. Oh yeah, hey, I would connect you with that person if you want. Or, oh, what about this company? You might like working there. I can send an email intro. There's so many opportunities if you just slow down long enough to look around and be humble enough to ask for help or feedback.
It's the Pareto principle. 80% of what you do is a waste of time. 20% of what you do yields 80% of the results. What if you hadn't been listening? What if you hadn't paid attention? What if you hadn't been opened? You'd still be struggling in the wrong job and you'd have your realization in 20 more years, right?
Yeah. I think about that often, especially whenever I go back home and I'm driving by some of these subdivisions where I worked as an electrician. And I think, oh man, I remember being out in that front yard and it was January. And oh, what if I was still doing that? And yeah, it's really, it's profound to think about how some small choices can make a huge impact.
And I'll pick up on what you said. Sometimes the advice isn't dead on. So I had a guy named Marty Rothstein and he called me Senator. And I would always go, and he had a Rolls Royce and an observatory on his house. And he was the man in New Mexico. And his son still is one of my best friends. And he would call me Senator. And he would say, hey, when you're president, make sure you hire me as Health and Services Secretary. And he always called me Senator. So I wanted to be a politician. And, we talked about the law career and I'd be a great lawyer because I have the gift of gab. And so I was steered the wrong way, right? I would not be a great lawyer because I'm not detail oriented. I don't really like rules. I kind of do things my own way. I don't work in the legal system. As a politician, I thought I wanted to do that. I could never handle being a politician. for a variety of reasons. So it wasn't the best advice, right? Directly, it wasn't the best, but the nuances were. Hey, Senator, I mean, the faith he gave me, the belief he gave me. So I set off on a path. And I was like you, I'm going down the river, and all of a sudden there's a new stream, and I go that way. And eventually I end up being a business guy. I would have never been a business guy if I didn't start off as wanting to be a lawyer. I would have never been a business guy if I had not been, I was not a great kid in high school. To have this guy saying nice things to me was really important in my life. And like you, I was open.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can see there was something he was picking up on, right? Maybe it wasn't the role of becoming a senator, but there was some essential quality in there that he saw in you. And he's like, oh, I've met people like you before, and you end up doing such and such, right? When I was young, probably 15 or 16, my dad and I were doing these landscaping jobs, and there was a gentleman whose house we sodded his front yard and laid some landscaping blocks or whatever. And he had a son who had went off and became a priest. And, that's cool. And we're talking out in the yard. I get to know him over a couple of days. And I'm pretty talkative for a 16-year-old. And he stopped me and he said, I don't know how you ever feel about this, but he said, I think you'd make a really good priest. And I said, what a weird compliment. I was like, wow, thanks. And he said, no, just in talking to you, you're personable, you can communicate. He's like, that's what, the Catholic, the Archdiocese, whatever. The Archdiocese needs more people like you, and you should consider that. I didn't take it seriously, wasn't very interested in it. But now looking back on what I do now, I was like, hot dog. That guy he saw me. He saw that I could communicate, that I can listen well, that, empathy is like my number 2 strength and strengths finder. So it's like it's amazing that someone can see that in a young person and say, wow, there's something there. I'll put my mental model on it. Here's what I think they could be good at and go do. But either way, the quality or that strength is still in there.
Yeah. So if people are giving you advice, they may have, what did you call it? They may have a different mental mind. Is that what you just said? They may have a different mental model. They have a different mental model. So they have their way of seeing things. Marty Rothstein was telling me, you're a good leader. You're a good leader, and you should apply that to law. Well, I worked on my leadership skills and applied it to business. This guy was saying, hey, Adam, you're a really good coach. Priests need to be good coaches. Priests need to be good consultants. Priests need to help people get from point A to point B. You took that advice and applied it to a different industry that's probably better for you as a person, just like business is better for me as a person. Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah. And priests very much are in the helping profession, which I consider myself to be. So yeah, it's amazing how you're getting those little clues. And I love, I've got a good friend who uses the word serendipity, and he's very into his faith. And regardless of your view of God or the universe, I do think that through life, we end up with these little paths or trails, whatever you said there, open up, the stream branches off, and you have that choice. And it's really, I think that the thing that's given me the confidence to pursue those things was really being more grounded in who I am, or having that understanding of what I'm after and what I'm about. And because I know there's been several times, like I could have told that, the coach that I met, that he actually invited me up to this training program. When we talked, it was starting that week in Chicago, and the program was like $13,000. And he's like, hey, if you leave in 2 days and drive up to Chicago and stay in this hotel and go to this weekend program, we're beginning this year-long transformational training program, and here's how much it costs. I could have very easily said, oh, hey, that's beyond my means. I can't do that right now. I've got to go back here to being a failed internet entrepreneur and not knowing what to do with my life, But I took a chance. And I called my parents. I was like, hey, can I borrow, a little bit of money here over the next few months? So it's really having the courage to kind of pounce on those opportunities.
You said humility, but it's really confidence. It's confident enough to be humble. It's confident enough to be open. It's confident enough to think, hey, maybe this other person has something that I could take out. And even the worst advice probably has a gem of awesomeness in it. And it's being open enough to find that. Wow. Well, I've really enjoyed this.
Go
ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to say that the word confidence there, that's really, that is a key word. I do a lot of interviewing when we hire professional coaches. I work with have way more experience than me. Even we have people for this line of work that's been doing coaching, consulting for 15 20 years. And at the interview, one of the things that's one of the number one things we ascribe. We say you have to be confident in who you are. You have to be able to come into an organization and not, what we call going native, to be able to come in and view them as an outsider, to partner with them enough to where they trust you, but also retain your own perspective, to be able to see them as their organization, diagnose and point out, oh, here's what's going on. You guys have really ineffective communication in this area or in this way. And it's that confidence to give feedback, to communicate directly, to kind of know who you are so that you can have a really clear, unmuddied relationship with your customer.
And the humility to be okay with them taking it or leaving it if you're in consulting.
Bingo. That's a huge thing. In my industry, especially, you have to not get your need. You have to get your needs met elsewhere. You can't be getting your identity out of how successful your ideas are or how much, I support people all the time. And I think, wow, what an amazing conversation. And they go off and they don't do anything about it. And if I'm not careful, I'm like, oh God, I suck. I'm a terrible coach, blah, blah, blah. No, that's just the game. That's part of the game. Just like sales, that sales mindset of like, hey, here's a decent closing percentage. It might be 30%, depending on your industry. It might be 10%. So to be able to go in, have the tough conversation, have the sit down, and be willing for them to say no. That's a big part of it.
Wow. So there's so much in here, so much humility, so much confidence, so much serendipity, all sorts of different paths that people can gain from. And I got to ask you one more question. It's one of my favorite questions, and it comes from me being in college and my parents inviting me to Spain and having a big trip to Spain, and then running into this dude, Jeremy Kisner, and taking the College Works job instead, and giving up my spring break and giving up my summer, and how horrible that was and how pissed I was. And all the victim stuff that I chose to take a job instead of going to Spain. But I look back and I'm so glad I did it. So what sacrifices have you made that you'll never regret and that you would encourage your young self to sacrifice again?
Oh my gosh. Well, that year of 2011, when I took on the debt of a training program and 12 trips to Chicago from St. Louis that I paid for as much as I could out of pocket, while I had friends going to work for Wells Fargo and Bank of America and successful, all kinds of companies. And I was watching them, that my same peer group, they were putting money away in their retirement. They were inviting me out to go to bars and party and all this stuff. They were buying new automobiles. Like, there was all these things. And here I am just like slumming it, living with two roommates in South City, St. Louis, barely, eating healthy food, like barely making my grocery budget, while watching my friends do the traditional route. And because all in the pursuit of something that I really wanted, finding how to find a role or work career path that lined up with who I was. There was a tough couple of years there, really lean, really, didn't have a lot, and I got my wife out of the deal. I wouldn't have, I was working on myself. She was very attracted to that. We met in 2011, it'll be 10 years this fall. And I had never been more clear on who I was as a man and what I wanted for my future. And just bam, instant found my dream woman. So it's very clear now looking back, I would not have any of this, have an amazing son, amazing family, incredible job, paid very well. I wouldn't have any of that had I not sacrificed back then because of getting really clear on what I wanted.
You sacrificed your ego. You didn't sacrifice the money. You sacrificed your ego. That's hard to do.
Yeah. It was, there were points where they were borderline humiliating. I'd see friends from college, we're out of college for 2 or 3 years at this point, like, hey man, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm living in a basement and I have a failed internet company and I'm going off to become a coach. And they're like, what are you talking about? But I had my eye on the prize. And that process, consistently practicing, honing my craft. And here I am. And I help lead a team of 10 incredibly successful coaches, consultants, all of whom are older than me and have a ton of experience, and just am so lucky to be part of such an amazing team doing work that's really meaningful. And I think we're making an impact.
Well, all of my parenting mistakes were due to my ego, and I would get mad at my kids for screaming at a restaurant. Why am I taking them to a restaurant? And why do I care? They're kids. They're acting like kids. But I was embarrassed. Most of my business success is from not having an ego. And if you could sit there and just suck in everybody else's eyes for 2 years because you're doing the right thing, look what's happened. That sacrifice was life-changing.
Yeah, it was a total investment. So
yeah, an investment.
yeah.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for making time today. This was fascinating. I really appreciate you coming in with this crazy path to your end. Crazy means to your end. And I'm really stoked that you got through an entire lifetime of challenges in like 8 years because you have an ego control and you are open to possibilities. What a wonderful thing.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the acknowledgement there and the compliment, Matt. And pleasure to be here. And I hope, I hope you keep doing what you're doing. Kudos to you for doing this podcast. You obviously don't have to. Thanks for trying to lend a helping hand to the young people out there that are trying to figure out who they are and what their path, what path they should take.
Well, I think I found my path too. So this is why God put me here. So I'm happy to do it.